welcome everyone to the regular Finance Committee meeting. It is Friday, April 8th and a minute after 12 noon. Can we please do a roll call?
Councilmember Shirley?
Here.
Councilmember Donaldson?
Here. Mayor
Kerr?
Here. So we're all in attendance. At this time, I'd like to open it up for any public comments. If anyone has anything to comment on not on the agenda, now is the time. I am seeing none, so I'll bring it back. And I'd like to turn it over to our city manager for our first agenda item.
All right, yeah, the first agenda item is the financial reports for last month with the comparison to the same month the year before. And I'm going to turn that over to Robert, and he's going to give us an update on that.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is share my screen with you and kind of go over the numbers a little bit. This setting gives us an opportunity to kind of go over the numbers more in detail than at the meeting. It's typically on consent, so it goes by a lot quicker. So let me share here. So you received, this is just a cover for the staff report, but I'd like to kind of go over the actual reports, and then you let me know if you have some questions. So this is the March cash balances compared to a year ago. We're actually doing pretty good. A couple of things to highlight: the fact that the escrows for the South Boundary Road construction still sitting there, as is the General Jim Moore waiting for activity. The 9,000 is for the Monterey Peninsula Partners development. That's still sitting there. Those haven't changed, but the section 115 trust, just to let you know, a year ago it was at 310. It's at 351. So whatever money we can put into the 115 trust has a much higher return than what we put into LAIF, because it's invested differently. It has, it's not limited by state law like the local agency or CDs are. This one can invest at a little bit higher returns because it's a long-term investment. So it actually pays pretty good money that can then be used for the pension costs. The other item to make note of is the general checking. We will be transferring some money into LAIF this month, because at the end of this month, we will be getting property taxes. And the bank account doesn't provide much of a return, so we'll be moving some money over to the local agency investment fund. And we will be having, for the board meeting, normally we break this one out. We forgot to, because some of that is the economic uncertainty fund. There's other funds that are monies that are somewhat restricted. So we'll break that out for the board meeting. We forgot to do that for this meeting. But bottom line is the city's in good position cash-wise. The other item, then you have your list of checks that are being paid for the month. You got that. If there's ever any questions, by all means, let us know. So typically about a little over 200,000 is the regular monthly expenses. That does not include payroll. That's just, accounts payable, invoices, and the like. Then we give you a one-page summary of the general fund, because that is the city's operating fund. So this is for the month of March. So when it says current month, we're talking about March, and we can see the total revenue was 247. Expenses were 320. So for the month, we actually had a deficit of 73,000. For the month, we just had more expenses than revenue. One of the revenues we don't get is property taxes. That doesn't come in till when we do the month of April. That'll look much better. So for the month, it's a deficit of 73. Year to date, July through March, revenues are 3.2. Expenses are at 2.9. So actually we have a surplus for the year. After December, we have a little bit of a deficit for a few months until property taxes come in. But year to date, we are doing good. We actually have a surplus. The other thing to mention is, March is 75% of the year. So right now, our revenue is at 71.4%. The only reason it's behind is because property taxes are at 58. We'll get those in April. Other than that, you can see that everything else is pretty much, the big ones in particular, other taxes, which includes sales tax, is at 75. And the current services, which includes the airport, is at 72%. So I think come April, we will be better than the percentage where we'll be at. Revenues are on track. Expenses are at 69%. So we have a little bit more leeway in the expenses. The only one, the police department, is at 76.85. So they'll be monitoring that one closely as we get closer to the year end. In the past, the county used to bill at the end, like for 911 services and all of that. Now they're almost kind of in advance a little bit. So we've had quite a few expenses here, but this one is good. Everything else is tracking very well for the year for the general funds.
Roberto, can I
Yes.
interrupt? Can I
Certainly.
ask a question on that previous slide?
Yes,
What is non-departmental?
non-departmental.
It's under
oh.
government buildings? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's basically anything that can't be put into one of these other categories. Typically, we try to put everything into city clerk, city manager, and I can actually show you the line items that make up non-departmental in a little bit. And we may try this year to put that into departments. As I get to this next page, I will be sure to address what's in non-departmental right now.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is just a one-page summary at a quick glance. We can see the general fund is doing good. It's on track. The next report is the actual detail behind those numbers. All the revenues, and you can see sales tax, even after our adjustment, we increased the budgets, is at 82%, and the add-on is at 78%. So sales tax is doing quite well. As we know, cannabis, we reduced that. It's still only at 67%. But this just gives you the detail to the revenue items and to the expenditure items. And to answer your question regarding the non-departmental, here's non-departmental. Oops. The look like some liability. This should we will be transferring this to another department. The liability should be charged to each of the departments. This 14,802. I guess the big one is this members' dues and contributions, which is the city's contribution to other agencies. By now it's non-departmental. We could put it someplace else. That is the single biggest thing in here. And actually it looks like we probably have a couple of miscoded items because this is the same expenditure line item that's also used for member dues and contributions for each of the departments. You know, the police department has contributions to different agencies. The city manager belongs to different agencies. So we'll clean this one up for the next report. And then maybe for the budget, consider whether we leave it in non-departmental or someplace else. Some places have, some agencies have community development or community promotion, which is what, you know, this kind of is. It's belonging to other organizations that help with the promotion of the community. But that's the answer to that question. And then you have the details. What I wanted to do is just briefly look at the other funds. So the gas tax fund is at 71% and expenses are at 57%. One of the things to keep in mind, the expenses that are being paid for by the gas tax fund are street sweeping and street lighting. Street sweeping is provided by the city of Seaside. So that bill we get when they give it to us, we just got a bill for 6 months. So for a long time we have nothing. Now they billed us at 59%. So this is really 6 months worth. So we will probably be right about 10,000 by the end of the year. And street lighting is what PG&E charges us for street lighting. That's the gas tax fund. It's budgeted to have a surplus of 16.4. So there is, which will probably happen right now. We're at a surplus of 15.3. The other fund that's a special purpose is the SB1. This is the other, the otherwise known as RMRA. This the additional gas tax that was implemented a few years back. We're at 73% of the budget revenue collected. The street improvements have been done, the Portola walkway, and there's still 20,000 budgeted for street curb replacement. And so this one is is on track. We just, this work still needs to be done. Revenues are coming in. The other one is the Measure X fund. This is the TAMC money that we don't get because TAMC is keeping it to pay themselves back for the loan that they advanced the city. Unfortunately, we don't have any numbers to report because we don't get anything. We asked them. They're supposed to provide us on a quarterly basis. You can tell it's already been, well, we're in March and we haven't gotten any numbers from them yet. We've requested it. As soon as they give us the numbers, how much they received on our behalf and how much they paid, we'll record it. But this one basically sits like this most of the year. For a habitat management fund, we have 73,000 budgeted, spent 11.6 on the habitat management planning. Basically Denise Duffy and Associates for that work. And the ARPA fund, you know, we received the 197 so far, and we haven't budgeted for these items. We just haven't spent anything. Actually, through March we had. Now there has been money spent. In April, you will see some expenditures for these items that council approved. And then we get to the grant fund, the park grant fund. We haven't spent anything yet. Well, we haven't paid for anything. My understanding is the expenses are moving forward. So there will be some expenses showing up here. And then we will be reimbursed. So we'll have to pay for this and get a reimbursement. The South Boundary Road Engineering, we have the budget. No engineering expenses have been paid for that one just yet here. And that's the last of the restricted monies. That's a short presentation on the finances. Happy to answer any other questions anybody might have.
Let's go. Ms. Shirley, do you have any questions?
I don't, Roberto. I feel like you read my mind with that presentation. You absolutely answered all the questions I had going in. So thank you. I look forward to seeing the breakout of the LAIF, L-A-I-F
Okay,
fund.
yep.
Yeah, so I look forward to that. But yeah, no, thank you for going through this. I appreciate it.
Mr. Donaldson, any questions?
Yeah, just have a couple of questions. So Roberto, on the escrow accounts, the ones that are specifically for South Boundary Road, General Jim Moore, is that restricted in terms of us putting that money into something that will gain some interest as opposed to it just sitting there, because essentially we're losing money because of inflation?
Yeah, unfortunately, we get nothing. We get charged a fee for them holding it. It's held in trust by Fidelity. The only ones that are making money is the bank because they put in a really non-interest bearing account. And it's part of the escrow agreement. That's unfortunately, that's just the way it was set up. There's not much we can do about it unless the whole agreement is redone. But unfortunately, it can't be redone because Fora is no longer there to help redo the agreement.
Okay. And then I also saw within the legal fees, there was a William and Amy Grass line item in there. I haven't heard of that. I'm not sure what that pertains to.
That's the code enforcement issue down on one of the A courts. I forget which one it is. Arbor. It was the hoarding issue that had to be cleaned.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Now I understand. And then also the contributions to the other agencies, you had pointed that out, Roberto. I haven't seen yet a breakdown of the money we give to all the different organizations. Is that something that's maybe readily available that I could take a look at?
Yeah, no, we can print that out. We can get a list and we can also provide it for the next finance committee meeting so everybody can see it. We'll
Okay.
be sure to put that on there.
All right. And I have no other questions, and thank you for your work, Roberto. Appreciate it.
Quite welcome.
So let me think. I just had a couple of more comments than anything, especially for you guys that have not been playing with this budget quite as long. Our legal charges are lower than last year, and it's a good thing. I believe last year when, after Dino left and when Jeff came on, both he and I were far more reliant on Alex because we were both doing it without, having a longer term city manager. So I'm hoping that at the end of the year, we have some excess there, or we get some things resolved and it'll save us money in the long run. But the other thing is DD&A usually always pays their or invoices us late. So it's always, it seems to me like 3 to 4 months late, which drives me crazy. It'll come in July and August for last year. Can you tell me how much cannabis tax has been deferred? John?
Yeah, I think the last time we looked at it, Roberto, we're right around 400,000, right?
Okay. And so we'll be talking about that at some point soon?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, there's processes that need to be implemented before we bring it to the council.
sure. And you guys are still working on the airport agreement?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we'll hear that as well, whatever comes up.
I've reached out to the general manager a few times to schedule a meeting and haven't heard back, so.
Okay. And then the last one is, there's talk at the state level that the gas tax may be, I don't know what the right word is, delayed, deferred, postponed, canceled for a little while. How will that affect us? I think they were talking about stopping it or slowing it down for about 6 months.
Yeah, so generally speaking, I would oppose that. I don't think that that's a smart strategy. For good or bad, gas tax was chosen as the funding source for road maintenance and repair and reconstruction. It's always been an insufficient funding source, but it was done to protect the state's general fund. The tax monies don't increase as quickly as the need and the costs. It's always been an issue since they've done it. They raid the tax money whenever they get into trouble sometimes. And so it's an inadequate funding source to begin with. And so, and I think we're all aware that our infrastructure is in desperate need of repair. The infrastructure bill is going to help, but it's not going to fix it. Generally speaking, I would not support a gas tax vacation or whatever. I would rather see the legislators step up to the plate and provide some sort of money to people directly to benefit everybody rather than just benefit drivers. We're feeling it at the gas pump, but we're also feeling it at the grocery store and everywhere else. And I get that gas tax is the political, hot button issue, but I don't think that it's the good solution. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. But generally speaking, we don't get a lot of gas tax. So I don't think it's a significant hit to us, but it will be a hit to us, and we may have to put other funds next year towards paying for street sweeping and street lights. Like Roberto said, we'll figure out. I don't know. I haven't looked, Roberto. Maybe off the top of your head. Every year we don't budget the full amount of gas tax, so we've been building up a bit of a reserve.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, and so that'll help get us through any.
Yeah, no, most definitely. We do have a little bit of a reserve, and that's only been used for those items. The other thing is we prepare the budget next month. We should be bringing a preliminary budget. We'll be digging a little bit further into that. The one comment that I've heard is that, hey, if the state wants to, that's fine. The state will have to backfill though, because the local agencies still need their monies. If the state wants to give everybody a break, that's up to the state.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that, we were talking about it and if and how that comes up. That's all I have. So shall we, Mr. Donaldson?
Yeah, I just have a question. The airport agreement was brought up. What are we talking about there? Is that the police agreement or is there some other agreement?
Yeah, it's the, just the remedy that Roberto's talked with you guys about before, in terms of how we calculate ongoing and long-term retirement costs, and what's fair for the airport to be paying based on costs associated with people who were hired before the contract started. So there's some true up on that needs to happen. It benefits the airport, so I'm not really sure why they're not responding and wanting to meet with me on it, but I'm happy continuing to charge them based on the wording in the current contract, if that's the way they want to go, because that's more money for us.
I also want to make sure that we can recoup whatever or half of whatever Roberto has spent researching this on their behalf. So.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I would negotiate with them to take out of, if we owe them money because we've been overcharging them for the last couple of years, we would just back out Roberto's costs from that and deal with it that way.
Great. Scott, anything else? Okay, so let's move on to the 5-year capital improvement plan. Mr. Gurton.
All right. I'm gonna share my screen, I hope. So yeah, so I put on there. So generally speaking, I've talked with you all about, just wanting to build some of these tools and processes for longer range strategy and planning of our finances and our budget, because even though we're doing really well, we are still, like everyone else, resource restrained. And, we have flexibility now that we've probably never had before to deal with hiccups and road bumps, which is great. But I want to make sure that that's sustainable and we keep, I want to stay in the position that we're currently in and continue to make things better. So capital improvement plan is one of those on the agenda. I called it a 5-year plan. For us, it's probably really more realistic to just do a 3-year plan. It's not something that we need to strictly adhere to. I don't think it's something that we need to put a huge amount of effort into, or like buying software or anything like that. I just want for us all to be conscious and thinking as we go forward in terms of multiple years of capital projects, and planning out. Nobody knows better than Ron what's happening out there and where the impacts are to us and where the future problems are starting to develop. And so we, rather than coming all at once and telling you, hey, we have a storm drain failing, or we have, and we're going to need $300,000 to fix it. If we know that that's going to be a repair that we're going to need to do 3 years from now, it's better to get it on the list now and start talking about, okay, how are we going to come up with $300,000 3 years from now? Because $300,000 is a lot of money for us. And that's something that could take a couple of years for us to plan for, because doing it all at once can be a big impact to our budget, and also an impact to the things that we thought we were going to get done this year. So this is just a quick spreadsheet that I threw together just to kind of give a visual of, what I think it would look like. I want to track our bigger projects. These don't get bogged down with the numbers. I just kind of threw in placeholder numbers. Some of them are pretty accurate. Some of them I just made up numbers. But these are a lot of the projects that we're looking at. I threw in a couple years ago just for perspective on what we accomplished 2 years ago, then all of the things that we had in for this year. And it's not just public works projects. It's also big things like, technology upgrades and things like that. So So generally speaking, and Roberto can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the Government Finance Officers Association, the council can set a limit on what they consider a good bottom limit for what you consider a capitalization limit for projects and for assets. GFOA recommends a limit of $5,000. So anything over $5,000 is technically appropriate to put into your capital plan. So that's why bigger items like the police department radio update, the mobile data units, the technology upgrades for the agenda management system and meeting system for the council chambers, things like that are appropriate to track here and for us to plan for those expenditures. But so you'll see this way, this is something that I would probably like to get to you a little bit earlier in the future, next year, like March at the latest. And I know Roberto would like to see it sooner rather than later too, so that when he's thinking about next year's budget, he sees the bigger ticket items that we're planning for the next year. Because you can start to see some pretty big things popping up on here. Fortunately, they're things that we're either applying for grants for or we already have funding for. But this year would be the year that we would start fine tuning what do we want to get accomplished in next year's budget. So we have that discussion in advance of actually developing the budget. So we get prioritization from your committee first and then from the council. But then also, once we have this list for the next year, it's really something that then should go to the Planning Commission for a review from them on consistency with our general plan. So things like south boundary realignment, wildfire fuel reduction, those are things that the Planning Commission should be looking at for alignment with the general plan. And then we can start to put some estimates for the next year out and even 2 years out or 3 years out, so that as we're making decisions for the next year's budget, we're keeping in mind what's hanging out there and what are we planning for 2-3 years down the road. This will also help us, with some real bringing us all down to earth and having real discussions about wish list items and things that we hear complaints about in the community and what with our limited resources is really feasible to get done. So, and then regular repair and maintenance, I think it's good to track that and show what we budget every year for that, so that then we can see how much we're investing in maintaining our assets. Not just, this is usually repair or replacement up here. This is what we're investing as we go annually. And is that something that we want to take a look at? Do we want to be putting more money into maintaining our assets? Just like your car, the more regular checkups you get, the regular oil changes and everything, your car is going to last you a lot longer. So the investment up front in our assets is going to help our assets last longer, so that the repair costs don't all pile up all at once. And then I want to start talking with the police department in particular, but Ron also for some of his big ticket items for vehicle replacement plan. We need to plan for how we're going to replace vehicles, what types of vehicles are we going to replace, more efficient vehicles, electric vehicles, that kind of stuff. And start putting money aside on an annual basis, so that when it does come time to replace a vehicle, it's not a one-time big hit. We've been planning for it and actually setting money aside for it. So this is what we're looking at. It's a work in progress. It's nowhere near done or perfect. We have a lot of new things and initiatives that we're working on here. So, everything can't be done at once. I was kind of hoping we could get this done for this year's budget, but we at least have a template that we can start working on. But I've been running Ron ragged lately, so he needs a little break. We haven't had the time to actually sit down and actually do sophisticated estimates and a sophisticated capturing of what are all of our capital needs for the next couple of years. So, but we'll get there. We'll definitely have next year's for the budget discussion with some things to talk about for going forward. But every year we'll get better at it, and every year we'll get more sophisticated. I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what my thought process is on this and where I see us going, you know, as we go forward, and then get your input on what you guys would like to see in this process. And so with that, I'm available for questions. Ron can answer any questions if you have questions about specific projects.
Wonderful. Thank you. This is, I love this. So thank you for, you know, throwing some mud on the wall.
Actually, you know what? I do have one more thing that I can share with you just for future conversation that I just remembered. So let me stop sharing this and go back and share just to see what I'm thinking, obviously not for this year, but for next year. So that we have that spreadsheet that I just showed you. And then my hope is we get to a point where we actually have a CIP document that, you know, that's separate from the budget. It informs the budget, but it's actually something to present to you all and to the council so the community sees what we're dealing with. And this is just an example of, you know, a page from the city of Monterey's. So you see a little more information. They have software that spits this out for them, so they're lucky. But this is the kind of thing, you know, I'd like to have that spreadsheet and then information behind the spreadsheet at some point where each project has a little description so that the public can understand, you know, what are the needs, what are the projects we're looking at, what do they, you know, why are we looking at that as a project? What's the timeline? What's the funding? What's the funding need? It just gives a little more information than just a spreadsheet. So that's for future. That's not for right now, but I figured I'd share that with you.
I like that too. So let's go out for questions. Ms. Shirley.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Just for reference, historically, how have we made a plan? Have we made any plans for capital improvements? Or do we just pay for things as they come up? What have we done historically?
Yeah, I think it's been a little more informal, and Ron can probably give you, and Roberto can give you more historical information. It's done every year in the budget. And so I know, you know, the previous city managers and Ron and Roberto, you know, they were obviously thinking about things out in the future and planning for things and talking with you all about it when you do the budget. But then the budget was really focused on the next fiscal year and funding for that fiscal year. So this is just formalizing our thought processes. We're all working together and putting that into a format that can clearly explain it for you all and for the community. You want to add anything to that, Roberto?
Yeah, so historically, the city has not formalized this process like what John wants to do. Typically, it's been, okay, we get started on the budget around January, February. Okay, what do we need to do next year? Okay, these are the pressing needs. So that's what ends up on the list, not looking out 2 or 3, 5 years to see what else is coming down the road.
Yeah, I really like that idea of planning for the future, John. So I'm really happy you've put this together so we can see and plan for those big items. So in your spreadsheet for next year's fiscal year, would you imagine we would just budget those entire items since we're coming up on next year's budget, and then the year after that, we would sort of think about a percentage that we would put towards those future investments? What guidance, I guess, are you looking for in terms of a policy for putting money towards those future capital expenses?
Yeah, as part of the planning for that, it really is project specific, and we'd have different recommendations depending on the funding sources that we were recommending, because some of them where it can really be helpful to think long term like this is that a lot of the stuff that we do is eligible for grant funding. And so if we have those projects in the front of our mind, you know, sometimes it can take 2 or 3 years to identify and get grants. So rather than rushing at the end of the time to get the project done and looking for grants, we can be spending a couple of years. So some of them will be making recommendations on. These are things that we're looking at. They're out there. These are our estimates, and we're looking for grant funding. And these are the grants that we're looking at going after. Some of them will be current year discussions, even though they'll be 2 or 3 years out, because we have ARPA funding, or we'll have infrastructure funding or something like that. And just because we get that all in 1 year doesn't mean that we necessarily budget all in that 1 year to be used. We might want to spread that out over a couple of years. So that would be when we could be planning for current money to be spent, 2 years from now.
Right.
Or setting it aside for that project.
Mhm.
Say we have a $250,000 park project, and we want to set aside $25,000 of ARPA funds as seed money for a grant. So we have match money set aside for the grant. So that's why if you noticed in the project list, I had a funded and unfunded category.
Mhm.
So we could set aside $25,000 to a $250,000 project, knowing that that's intended to be matching funds for any grant that we get. And we know we still have a $225,000 gap that we're trying to fill.
I see. Okay. So there's a lot of components, obviously, that goes into funding, right, these things. So I think it's great that it's all out. Ron, I have a question for you. This was a shorter list than I was expecting. I would imagine you'd come to us and have a list of 25 things. Was this the most important things that you identified within the city?
You guys are gonna make me talk again, right? No voice. Yes, I mean,
Oh.
there's certain projects that are super important just for the longevity of like our current roads and stuff, and not having to put a Band-Aid on and not have to come back and fix bigger projects such as the curbs that are sticking up and water's undermining and eroding some of the roads, especially on Rosita going up. We need to address those sooner than later. But there's curbs there. There's a storm drain at the intersection of Rosita and Angeles that's failing. And it goes back to some of the curbs that are not being upkept and repaired, and the water's going underneath. And we have that huge culvert going through there where the creek runs through.
Mhm.
That's something that we need to think about in the near future.
Mhm.
And he also has a punch list of
Okay.
that's a lot longer. That really falls more in the category of repair, of maintenance.
Maintenance. Yeah. And I think that's smart to also think about that category too. Yeah. Okay. But no, that's it for me. Thanks for this planning.
Mr. Donaldson.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to say I really like this process. So John, great job in not only kind of identifying it within the spreadsheet, but also where you want to go with the product. That last piece that you showed, I think formalizing that and showing that's where you want to go with it. I like that as well. So I really appreciate you pulling that together. And then also to Ron, outstanding. I mean, Ron is the key to not only identifying the projects that we need to start taking a look at, but he's also been key with the grant funding and getting the funds to make this happen. So as I was looking at it, I noticed that almost every project is going to be funded through some sort of state funding, grant funding, that type of money that we have coming in. Now, for the repairs and maintenance, though, I saw that it's general funds that pay for that. And I was just wondering, is there any way that we can use some of that grant money to also pay for those repairs and kind of the general maintenance?
I haven't seen grants typically that pay for that type of work. They're usually more focused on either new construction or on rehabilitation and reconstruction. I don't know about you, Roberto, but yeah, for regular ongoing costs like that, grants usually don't pay for that type of thing.
No, the best that we can hope for is using the gas tax and the SB1 monies. Purposely, the SB1 has not been spent up to now because it was just a small amount. Really couldn't do much with it. You could spend it, but there's enough built up that perhaps some projects can be done, or we can look at it in this next year's budget. It all goes towards street maintenance and start doing some of those repair work that needs to be done. But those are the two sources the city has at this point.
Yeah, typically grants usually have, state and federal funding have a condition in them called supplantation. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Where basically you can't use grant funds to replace funding for ongoing stuff that you already are required to do. So it's supposed to be in addition to your normal regular work.
Roberto, don't we also have a small TAMSI fund? We get some money every year, but we don't record it or something?
Yeah, except that money, we don't actually get it anymore.
Okay,
They keep it. We do have a little bit left over that. So in the budget process, we're gonna develop all the fund summaries. So you see all the money that's actually there, it's there, but it's one-time money because it's not coming back. It's money that's accumulated. So we need to give serious thought to how to spend it, because once it gets spent, it'll be gone. It's just little bits that have been building up over the years and
right.
those funds.
But it's not currently reported, right? Because what you're reporting is Delray Oaks money, whereas that's TAMSI money for Delray Oaks. If I
Yeah,
remember
but they-
correctly, it's not a lot. I mean, do we have $25,000 or something? But still, yet again, one more little pot of money that, we should be looking at as well.
We'll be bringing back a list of everything that we have, including there is a little bit of TAMSI money left that we can use, and then decide how best to use it. Again, my emphasis is that this is going to be one-time money, so we need to really plan how to use it, because it won't be coming back.
Scott, did you have anything else?
Yes, so in addition, like John, you were saying that the grant funding that we receive is for that specified purpose, and I get that, but is there ever any leeway within that grant where we can include some maintenance and repair? And, kind of the way it's worded, that we can use some of that money in addition to paying for the project, we could also earmark part of it to go towards maintenance and repair.
Yeah, no, it's usually repair. Yeah, we can use it to repair roads, curbs, things like that. But generally not for regular ongoing maintenance. We're getting into kind of semantics because a lot of the projects are repair and maintenance, but they're not the normal, just day-to-day stuff that Ron does. These are, bigger targeted projects. But slurry seal, all that stuff. Yeah, that's all eligible grant stuff, and that's technically maintenance. So yeah, it just depends on what we're talking about. Going and cleaning out storm drains, things like that. Generally, there is no grant money to help with that kind of stuff. But if you need to repair the storm drain, you can get money for that. Yeah.
Right, and I was kind of looking more towards the day-to-day type stuff. So I understand that's tricky.
Yeah.
But I just thought I would ask. And then the last comment that I'll make is, I think it makes a lot of sense, John. You mentioned going through the planning commission first, and it makes sense for all the reasons that you mentioned. Plus, there's usually some sort of architectural review element to what we do. So that allows that opportunity as well. And plus it allows the public to make comments. So I like that idea.
Yeah.
And that was it.
All right. I don't have anything further other than I really like the direction this is going. In January of 2019, right after I got elected the first time, I asked Dino to do kind of a state of the city, and he did do a financial outlook of certain things that he was anticipating. And, I want to say it was something like $14 million or something. But that might be something interesting just to take a look at and to see, what we may have already been, what we may have already achieved and what, we also have planned. And if there's anything, missing, I doubt it because Ron is on it, but thank you. I'm liking this. Any other comments from council or John, Roberto, Ron?
No, there's no public, but we should probably go ahead and put it out to them anyway.
Okay, any public comments on any item on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. On that, if there's no further conversation, we are adjourned.
So real quick, before everybody jumps off, it's fine that we're adjourned. Our next scheduled meeting, Karen, I think is on the 13th, which is
13, okay.
the 13th of May, which is 2 days after I get back from France. And so I'm fine working with Roberto because the big thing for that one is the first look at what we're recommending for the budget. So I think it's a good target for us to go for. But it is 2 days after I get back. So just if you guys are comfortable, we might need to reschedule and do a special meeting the next week.
Sure.
Just to give us a couple more days where Roberto and I can sit down and actually talk to each other in person and fine tune some things. So just keep that in mind. We're going to shoot for the 13th, but we may have to reschedule.
So should we look at our calendars and see if the 20th works? Same, just 1 week later, Friday noon?
Sure.
That it's going to bump up into, planning for the agenda.
Right.
But
So maybe
give you enough time.
I maybe, the 18th Wednesday, if that works for you all.
Okay, that I'm going to need to double check, but
Okay.
okay.
And
no,
like I said, we're gonna try to get everything done for the 13th. So
Okay.
hopefully we won't need to, because I don't want to push up against the council meeting as well. Karen doesn't want me to push up against the council meeting.
It's a heavy lift though. May is an important financial month, so
It is, yeah.
I think you need the time. The two of you need the time together to figure out whatever. So I'm
Yeah.
flexible,
Okay, I have full
Me too.
confidence in Robert.
of course.
Zoom exists everywhere, even in Europe,
That's right.